Good afternoon and welcome to Monsieur Dutoit's English Conversation Learning channel. I will be talking about principles that I use in my own teaching here in Le Havre, in Normandy, in France. When I meet my students for the first time, we usually take a few minutes for them to guess where I'm from based upon my accent. Have you managed to guess where I'm from? Usually they say, "You're from Ireland, Scotland, from England." And I'm like, no ways. And then they would say, okay, maybe you're from the Netherlands. Eventually I tell them, you're in the wrong hemisphere, or you're on the wrong continent. And then I'd have to give them clues such as, we are rugby players, that's why I'm as big as I am, since I haven't been playing rugby professionally for the last 5 years. Some of them would then say, oh, New Zealand. And I'd say, they probably our number one enemy in rugby. And then some would say, Australia. And I'd say, no, not even close. Well, in any case, I sometimes have to give them a few more clues, but eventually the cat is out of the hat and they understand I am from South Africa. Now, my accent has evolved over time, having traveled much, lived in many different countries, experienced many different cultures. So, by way of introduction, then I also ask my learners to introduce themselves, where they were born, where they're from. Then I also ask them to tell us a bit more about their dream destination for the holidays or that trip that they want to do one day when they can go to the place that they've been dreaming about going to. At the end of our introduction time, the last question I'd pose to them is usually, what is your dream occupation? What would you love to do one day in the future as a career or as a job? And then when we get to the next lesson, usually, I will show them the principles I use, whether it comes to learning a new language, solving problems, dealing with issues in life, whether it is in school, such as with other subjects, mathematics or geography or history, or in relationship even, relationship within the family or in the couple. And so we start by depicting our train of thought, our mind as a train. A train carries cargo. The cargo, in our case, would be information. I mentioned that there are 3 steps that form part of the process of arriving at understanding, which is we start with information, then integration, and then application. These steps or these parts of the whole of what can also be called wisdom is when good information, which we need to sift and choose between bad information and good information, or what is true or what is fake. Once we get what is good, proper, true information, we integrate it. We allow it to become part of our frame of reference or of our thinking, and then we can apply good information in a good way, and that equates or is wisdom. So wisdom is right information, properly integrated and applied to a situation, and that is wisdom. So then we give them 2 keys that I tell my students, any problem you face, whenever you see me in the corridors or after many years again you see Monsieur Dutoit, I always want you to say the 2 words that you'll be learning today. And so I start by asking them. Now, my students are French, and they have a benefit, and that is that French and English have had a coexisting relationship, and a relationship of influence, especially from French to English side, over the millennia, even over the centuries. Especially here in Normandy, the history with William the Conqueror is an amazing history of how 1,000 years ago, the Duke of Normandy set sail for England across La Manche, or the Sleeve, or the English Channel, as it's called outside of France. And he conquered England and became the king over Normandy and over England. And for about 150 years, the kings of the Norman heritage or lineage ruled over England. And during that time, there was a tremendous impact of the French language upon English. So many of our Shin words, we've heard information, integration, application, come from French. And so it helps the French speaker to think of a word they don't understand, firstly in French. That's by a way of association, associating it with either the French word, we can arrive at comprehension. And so I ask my students, imagine your train of thought is an actual train carrying cargo, information. You want to travel and arrive at the station of comprehension. The train needs to travel on what? And so we think of the words in French. The French word rail is the English for rails, or the railway tracks. And so for today's discussion also with you, we'll be looking at these two key words, concepts, and the two railway tracks upon which the train of our thought can travel with information that is being processed to the station of comprehension, the destination where we could have proper information integrated in order to be applied. So information, integration, which is a journey, and to arrive at the place of application by comprehension, by understanding what we are dealing with and how to discern and how to apply understanding that is gained in the process. Now, when we speak of the two railway tracks, I ask my students to think of a word, for example, that we might have a hard time understanding from a text that I might show them. And so I'd ask a student to read the text, and they would invariably reach a word which they don't understand. Usually the word has numerous syllables, so it is a word such as formation, for example. That's a very easy one for people speaking French, because it's the same in French. Formation, again, all the Shin words are from French. So let's take, for example, information. It's a beautiful concept, how this word is formed. And so in French, we have the same names, just differently pronounced for those different parts of a word. So I say the first railway track is route. The word route. Get to the root of a word in order to get to its meaning. To get to the root, one usually has to remove that which is either in front of the word or behind the word that has been added on. Either both, one or the other, or both. And so my French students, I would ask them what comes before a root, the basic building block of a word. And then they would say, prefix. Yes, exactly, but we say it in English, a prefix. And what comes after the root? An additive to the word. Well, a suffix. Well, it's a suffix. It's pronounced suffix in English. So we would often have a prefix, the root, and the suffix, or the root and a suffix, or the prefix and the root. So we've got to discern, we've got to analyze, we've got to find out what is the root of a word in order to grapple with its meaning and to get to a place of understanding what that word potentially can mean. That's the first railway track, is root. The second one, from looking into the word, we've got to look outside of the word, around the word. And then I'll ask my students, what is that called? That which surrounds the word. For example, the word is part of a sentence. The sentence is part of a paragraph. So what is that environment of the word called in English? It's the context. And so we have the second railway track. Those two rails or railway tracks upon which the train of our thought travels needing to reach the station of comprehension. Those two railway tracks bring our load of information carried upon the train of our thought to a place where we can arrive at comprehension. If we follow the two railway tracks, and always they must be running parallel, you've got to go into the word, get its basic building block, the root, and then look at the context, what surrounds the word, what surrounds the sentence, in order to deal with comprehension. When we are reading a text with which we are having difficulty, we can apply these two principles, get to the root of something you don't understand. And now this can be used also in life when you're facing problems, when you're facing issues that you need to deal with. Don't get tied up in the branches. Get to the root of an issue. Get rid of the prefix and the suffix and focus upon that where meaning is encapsulated in the word itself. And then in order to get the meaning, you also have to look, not just microvision, but macrovision. You've got to look at the surrounding. You've got to look at the context. And so for today's first introductory session, remember, root and context. Root and context. Those are the two railway tracks that'll take your train of thought to the station of comprehension.